Chapter 8, 1071, The Battle of Manzikert. Morning of Friday, 27 Dhul Qa'dah, 463 after Hijri, or August 26th, 1071 CE. Both parties began the day with prayer. A mass was performed at the Byzantine camp, followed by the parade of a large cross. The Muslims prayed and supplicated quietly. Romanus promised the world to his army, while Alp Arsalan reminded his own of the hereafter. Later that morning, the Byzantines assembled into their battle ranks and began their march toward the Muslims. The battle array consisted of 4 groups: the left and right flanks, a central corps consisting of the elite guards, the heavy cavalry and the emperor, and a rear guard which served to support the other 3 divisions when required, and to protect against an attack from the back. Wearing a distinctive mantle embedded with precious stones, Romanus oversaw the steady advance of his troops from his vantage point. The Byzantines were employing their traditional battle tactics, looking to engage the enemy in a head-on battle, confident that their superior armor and numbers would grant them victory. At the same time, it was crucial that they maintained their tight formation. Breaking ranks and allowing the Muslims in between the lines could cause great havoc. Meanwhile, Alp Arsalan finalized battle plans with his commanders. They were wearing white, which would act as a burial shroud if they were to perish. It was a strong signal to everyone else that they would either be victorious or die fighting. There would be no flight. About 12,000 Muslims arranged themselves in a crescent formation, consisting of a corps with 2 flanks. Other troops were hidden strategically in the environs to spring traps and ambushes. The Muslim tactic was to draw out the battle for as long as possible, challenging the discipline and the endurance of the Byzantines. Their flanks would engage their Byzantine counterparts repeatedly, hoping to draw them out of formation and lure them into the ambushes. The flanks would be persistently sprayed with arrows from horseback archers, primarily to harass and provoke the breaking of rigid Byzantine formation. Any chance of victory would require the Byzantines to lose shape and discipline. This was the Sultan's objective and hope. Alp Arsalan was perched on higher ground, observing the battlefield. He would personally enter the battle when the time was right. The battlefield's environs was warm, with the northerly winds growing more aggressive as the day progressed. The dust created by the Byzantine march began to swirl upwards and into the faces of the Muslims, burning their eyes. The weaker amongst them considered fleeing, but were urged on to continue the battle. And so they did. Wave upon wave would attack the Byzantine flanks, while the center would steadily retreat, enticing the Byzantine corps to break formation. The harassed Byzantine flanks would chase the Muslim horsemen, only to fall into the numerous traps and ambushes that were carefully laid. Nevertheless, Romanus marched on. Surely sooner or later, Alp Arsalan had to face the emperor in battle, a scenario in which Romanus believes he cannot lose. The time had come for Alp Arsalan to launch his counterattack. He waited as advised for the khatibs to complete Asr prayer and their supplications for victory. It was time to confront the enemy head-on. Donned in white garb, Alp Arsalan armed himself with mace and sword and tied a knot in his horse's tail and put on his helmet. He then addressed his soldiers. "We are with a depleted number of men. I want to throw myself upon them at this hour when the prayers are being said for us and the Muslim on the pulpits. Either I will achieve that goal or go as a martyr to paradise. He amongst you who wants to follow me, let him follow me. And he who wants to leave, let him leave my company. Here is not a sultan commanding or an army being commanded, for today I am only one of you and a Ghazi with you." This was the moment they had waited for all day. No one was leaving now. The Sultan then dismounted his horse, placed his forehead on the ground, and began to beseech Allah. "O Allah, I have placed my trust in you and have come closer to you through this jihad. I have rubbed my face in the dust before you, and I have smeared it with my life's blood. My eyes are flowing copiously with tears, and the sides of my neck are exuding blood. If you know that what is in my innermost heart is different from what I am saying with my tongue, then destroy me, and those of my helpers and servants who are with me. If my secret thoughts are in accordance with my overt utterances, then help me to fight jihad against the enemies. Give me from your presence a sustaining power, and make that which is difficult easy for me." He kept making this plea incessantly until there is a prolonged and noticeable silence. Alp-Arslan noticed it. The blustering wind, which was blowing into their eyes all day, had stopped, as if it were taking a breath. But there was something else adding to the silence. Romanus had halted the advance. He is concerned. The Byzantines have been drawn out far from their camp without fully engaging the enemy. Was this a ploy to attack their base from the rear? Also of concern was the shape of his troops. The flanks were being drawn out too far, opening an undesirable gap. The soldiers needed to stop advancing in order for the army to re-establish their tight formation. The long and hot march was also denting their morale. Hunger and thirst only heightened their unease. The terrain under the emperor's feet was also starting to break up and rise. Romanus decided to return to base, choosing to tackle the Muslims the next day. He knew eventually Alp-Arslan had to face him, as he couldn't keep retreating. A signal was given to reverse the standard, indicating to the army that the march was now being reversed back to the camp. As if on cue, the settled wind began to howl again, this time into the eyes of the Byzantines. Much confusion ensued. The Byzantine army could not decipher the message from the standard as it was swaying in wind. "The emperor has been defeated," while others cried, "Romanus is dead." The troops furthest away began to panic. Alp-Arslan was watching carefully, praising Allah as he noticed the right wing of the Byzantine army pulling away even further from the center, and the rear guard completely out of position. The Byzantines were in panic. Their discipline was crumbling, and they had lost their shape, opening up spaces to exploit. Alp-Arslan pounced. The Muslims' feigned retreat was over. The ground trembled as the Muslims charged their enemies, shouting Allahu Akbar in unison. Alp-Arslan's corps units attacked the Byzantine center with tremendous force and speed. The rest of the army mainly attacked the confused Byzantine right wing, which was the first to cave in and flee. This tactic opened up a space between the Byzantine rear guard and center, where Romanus was positioned. The Muslims swiftly moved into that space, isolating the Romanus. Instead of acting as a reinforcement, the Byzantine rearguard fled in fear. The left wing tried to come to the emperor's aid, but was cut off by the Muslim cavalry sweeping around the Byzantine center. Cut off from their leader, the left wing also fled. Romanus was witnessing in horror the army disintegrating before him, ready to be picked apart by the Muslims. The emperor, however, was no coward. He rallied his troops around him, urging his elite Varangian guards and imperial units to fight on. Desperate to survive and salvage his honor, the emperor fought valiantly, despite being completely encircled by his enemies. Before the end of the day, the battle was over. The Muslims were victorious. Byzantine troops retreated to the camp, announcing the death of the emperor. Most fled for their lives with whatever energy they could muster. A large number of their comrades lay dead across the Murat Valley. Alp Arslan had followed the tactics of his uncle Tugrul Bey during the Battle of Dandanakan against the Ghaznavids 30 years earlier, drawing the Byzantines out, harassing them, ambushing them, tiring them, breaking their discipline, and then launching a counterstrike when the time was right. It was classic steppe warfare, and the Byzantines should have known better. Alp Arslan knew very well the tactics would never have been successful without the help of Allah the Most High. His sincere and heartfelt dua was answered by a simple shifting of the winds, which triggered the implosion of the Byzantine troops. The puny Ghulam, who was enlisted out of Nizam al-Mulk's sympathy, fought bravely and survived the battle. During the course of the battle, one of his horses went astray. The Ghulam searched at length until he finally came across her. To his surprise, he found another horse close by, one with an ornamental bridle and a saddle of gold, obviously belonging to someone of a high rank amongst the Byzantines. As he came closer, he found a man in gold-plated helmet and armor. The man was wounded. Just as the Ghulam raised his sword to end the man's suffering, he stopped. Wounded by an arrow and barely able to speak, the man uttered in Greek, "I am the Caesar of Rum. Do not kill me, for the killing of kings is an evil omen." Being of Greek origin, the Ghulam understood fully what he said. This was no ordinary man. This was Romanus himself. The Ghulam seized the emperor and held him captive in his tent for the night. Hence the puny Ghulam, as history will know him, who only entered the fray as a gesture of Nizam al-Mulk's sympathy, was honored by capturing the emperor himself, a due reward for his courage and sincerity towards Allah. The next day, he would present his catch to Alp Arslan.